Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right. Welcome to Politics Done Right. From the studios of KPFT 90.1 FM Houston, your community radio station, we have a great program for you today. Before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about January 6th yesterday, which is bewildering. I'm from a country in Central America, Panama. And the kind of instabilities that we've seen in Central America, I don't want to go into the technicalities as to why that has occurred. Believe it or not, or the same sort of things that occurred in the United States or that are starting to occur in the United States that give us January 6th. You see, as Americans, and me as a naturalized American, we never believed that the things that we see around the world, the instabilities, etc., could somehow hit Americans. You see, we've been taught to believe that we are exceptional, that there's something about our humanity that is different than anybody else, but it's not. Riches and being the conqueror and a successful conqueror for a long time insulates one from the atrocities, one from the instabilities that we see occur around the world. But here's the kicker. The thing that has made us as a country do so much behind the scenes that many Americans cannot see are the things that are having to be done to the good people of the United States right now, the masses. You see, after you have done, and I'm not talking about Americans in general, I'm talking about the plutocracy, the psychopaths of any country, and the psychopaths of America are the largest of them all because they have the backing, the full force of the United States government and the military. When those sycophants are done doing their deeds around the world, and they've eaten so much of it, who do you think they're coming for next? What's their easy pickings? You! And they've used all kinds of techniques to attain that. And the frustration that you see, in as much as it is unwarranted on the right against those liberals, against those other people that are changing this country, the false sense of prejudice and all these sorts of things. Yeah, they're manufactured. They've always been manufactured. From the inception of this country, they've been manufactured because that is how we can control everybody. I talk a lot about these issues I'm being necessarily vague right now, but I talk a lot about these issues on Politics Done Right. So please always tune in here on KPFT on Thursdays at noon and Fridays at 11 a.m. Central Time. And of course, every day, Monday through Fridays at politicsdoneright.com/TV. But anyhow, like we said before, we have a great show for you today. We have Tim Danahey is going to talk about how we can sort of mitigate some of these problems. And then we have a regular at KPFT and someone that I've started speaking a lot with as well, which is El Señor, also known as Greg Palast. He's going to be with us. Ari Melber destroys one of the guys who was instrumental in the coup. We also have Joe Manchin's question for Joe Manchin by Claire McCaskill. So stick with it. Listen to the entire program. For those of you watching it on YouTube, watch the entire program because there's a lot here. There's a lot for us to go through. So hang tight because we have a lot to do. You can get any one of my books as a gift for becoming a member of KPFT. Go to kpft.org, click that donate button, select Politics Done Right as the show you're supporting, and go into the gift area and select As I See It, Class Warfare, the only resort to right-wing doom. Or you can also get It's Worth It, How to Talk to Your Right-Wing Relatives, Friends, and Neighbors. Or go to How to Make America Utopia, Take Away the Economy from Those Who Rigged It. If you get one book, it gives you one particular membership price. 2 books, you get a discount, and 3 books, you get an even better discount. So please consider becoming a member of KPFT, and in the process, you get the gifts of the books. You can get Politics Done Right Mondays through Fridays on Facebook Live at facebook.com/Politics Done Right, on YouTube Live at politicsdoneright.com/YouTube. Please do not forget to follow me on Twitter for updates. My handle is at Egberto Willies, at EGBERTO WILLIES. Before you get started, please remember to keep your community radio station in your minds, KPFT in your minds. Talk about it. Tell your friends about it. Tell them you know about this station in town, 90.1 FM Houston, that needs your support, that is there to provide that nourishment that we need. 713-526-5738. KPFT.org. Visit us online. Contribute online. KPFT 90.1 FM. You can visit us at kpft.org. You know what I'm going to tell you right now? We better do what? Let's get busy. Claire McCaskill, she is not a bastion of liberalism or progressiveness or even, whatever. But she has a question that I think Joe Manchin needs to answer. I mean, he's still talking through all sides of his mouth about whether he's going to at least modify the filibuster to ensure that everybody has the right to vote. I want you to listen to this, and then we'll take it on the other side.
Claire McCaskill, who is known as a moderate, sort of summed up the majority leader's sentiments earlier. Let's listen to how she put it.
How can it be fair that Republican legislatures all over the country are trying to suppress voters with a simple majority, but yet the Congress is not allowed to address those suppression efforts with the same simple majority? That's a pretty easy argument to make and, frankly, for everyone to understand. So hopefully, by putting pressure on Joe and Kirsten, they do the right thing and we can get a carve out for the filibuster.
If only I could explain the supply chain as well as she just explained what we're facing here with the filibuster. But how likely is that simple, straightforward argument that she is making to succeed?
Well, the filibuster is a rule. It's not a law. The Senate has the ability to change it. They demonstrated that just a month or so ago when they changed the rule in the Senate to allow for a vote on the debt limit. So it can be changed. And I think it is imperative for Democrats to do it because it's a moral imperative, first of all, to ensure voting rights for all Americans. But it's also a political imperative. Not only will senators and representatives face an election in which Republicans across state legislatures have gone aggressively, changed the rules for voting, changed the systems and the structures for voting to suppress the vote. And they've done it so that Republicans can win and Democrats can lose. And so Democrats need to make sure that there is guaranteed fairness in the system. I think it's possible for them to do that. It is a rule. It is not a law. It is easy for the Senate to change.
We spend a lot of time. It is absolutely easy for the Senate to change, and they should change it. The fact that we are having problems trying to get these people to do the right thing, it baffles the mind. changing, if we're talking voting rights, it never used to be a 50-50 proposition, a 51-50 proposition. Everybody once supported voting rights, but now we are in a position, as the article in the New York Times yesterday that I spoke about, there is a systematic coup that is occurring, and right now, as it is, Sinema and Joe Manchin are aiding and abetting the coup being effected by the Republican Party on the American system, because they do not have the policies that garner not even 60% of the American people's vote. So, Joe Manchin, are you listening? Trump economic advisor Peter Navarro probably thought that he was going on Ari Melber. And, Ari Melber comes across as kind of soft and he's mellow, etc. But the dude is pretty smart. He's hip and he's smart. And I think Peter Navarro probably learned that lesson, because I tell you what, for all practical purposes, for those who have any modicum of understanding what's going on, I think he made mincemeat out of Peter Navarro. I took some clips out of a very extensive interview that he gave him with regards to the insurrection, with regards to the coup that they attempted to effect on the American citizenry, the coup that they attempted, these traitors. And I think he let him have it. Check this out, and then we'll take it on the other side.
The question is, What was the plan itself and who was in on it?
The plan was simply this. We had over 100 congressmen and senators on Capitol Hill ready to implement the sweep. The sweep was simply that. We were going to challenge the results of the election in the 6 battleground states. We believe that if the votes were sent back to those battleground states and looked at again, that there would be enough concern amongst the legislatures that most or all of those states would decertify the election. That would throw the election to the House of Representatives. And at 1 p.m., Ted Cruz, Senator Ted Cruz, and Gosar, a representative, started the Green Bay sweep beautifully, challenging the results of Arizona.
You just described this plan as a way to take an election where the outcome was established by independent secretaries of state, by the voters of those states, and legal remedies have been exhausted with the Supreme Court never even taking, let alone siding with, any of the claims that you just referred to. So legally, they went nowhere. You will use the incumbent losing party's power, that was the Republican Party that was losing power, to overtake and reverse that outcome. Do you realize you are describing a coup?
No, I totally reject many of your premises there. First of all, the election was still in doubt and would be until it was certified. Second, the idea that secretaries of state, particularly in Michigan and Pennsylvania, were like innocent parties, they were put in power by George Soros for the express purpose of shifting the playing field to the Democrats. We were following the Constitution and rules of the Senate to simply get a recount of what the votes were.
But when you describe a system where, after all of the legal remedies are exhausted, the people who lost just make noise and then say that they won and seize power, don't you understand that if that actually were the system, it would be dumb and dangerous? If the people who lost could just get up there and say, well, we want to do our own count, not the state law recount, not what the Supreme Court provides for it, but just people in the Trump administration decide, well, we disagree. Don't you understand why people see your, whatever you want to call it, you don't want to call it a coup, your thing where when you lose, you stay in power, they see that as really dangerous?
Your presumption is the remedies were exhausted. My presumption is the remedies weren't exhausted at all.
Now, let's read from your book with regard to your contention about the vice president. You say, quote, Pence refused to take my repeated phone calls about election irregularities despite a direct request from President Trump to do so. What was your vision that you would get Pence to do that which Trump couldn't get him to do?
No, my only reason to talk to Vice President Mike Pence was to explain to him, as I documented in my 3-volume report, that in all likelihood there was significant election fraud and irregularities across the 6 battleground states.
This may be relevant, sir, in future elections, which is, sure. Don't you think somebody would have thought of this if the incumbent administration, through the president or the vice president, could just cancel the election outcome because he goes down to the Senate? Well, then a lot of people would try to stay in power. We have an entire system designed to thwart people like you, to stop people like you who think that you can anoint yourself the reviewers of the voters, of the American people, of what they lawfully did, that you trump the Supreme Court, no pun intended. People like you are what the Constitution are designed to stop. And it worked, and it did stop you. Well, Peter, again, I can't fact check everything in real time and also do the interview. But some of what you said is false.
Some of what you said is false. A lot of what you said is false. Let's get this straight here. It is important to understand that Republicans have not won the popular vote since the 90s, as I recall. If I recall correctly, I think actually, they've won it once since the popular vote, once since the 90s. And I think that was the second coming of President Bush numero dos. But they don't win elections because their policies suck. It's the undemocratic nature of the United States of America that has given the Republicans half of the time governing capabilities. But worse, we have allowed a party who has never or who rarely garners the popular vote the ability to set the Supreme Court for decades to come. We have garnered them the ability to set policy that hurts most of the people against their own will. And here, they are doing the same thing. The one question I wish Ari would have said, yes, he talked about them losing the election, but Donald Trump didn't only lose the election in 2020. He lost the election by a landslide, 7 million votes, more so than Hillary Clinton. And the nature of the undemocracy of this country shows that in as much as he won the election by more than twice the amount that Hillary Clinton won her election against Donald Trump by, 43,000 votes in the right states would have still given Trump a win, in as much as there was over 7 million vote advantage for Mr. Biden, for President Biden. If that is not how can we go around the world and talk about democracy? How can we ever talk about one person, one vote? How can we ever talk about this when we have what occurred with Donald Trump and the gall that these people have, in as much as they're losing by millions of votes, to fight about we won. The people don't want you. The people didn't elect you. You are putting yourself or trying to get into power, wrong or strong. You are fascist, and that is all there is to it. Americans need to wake up. We need to make a huge vote. We need to make sure that we have the court set appropriately. We need to destroy the Electoral College, and we need to simply change the rules of the Senate. And I'm not talking about canning the filibuster. I mean a constitutional amendment that a state that has 750,000 people cannot be the same, have the same amount of power in a Senate as a California that has orders of magnitude more in people than that state. This is not a democracy. Let's not go around the world telling people that when these are the things that can happen in the United States of America. Today, we are honored once again to be with Tim Danahey from the Tim Danahey Show of the past, which we hope to sometime get back in La Ola. He interviewed just about every book writer that was important and more, and former director of Coffee Party USA. Tim Danahey, thank you so kindly for being on Politics Done Right once again.
It's a privilege, Egberto. It's the best talk shows, I believe, in the country.
Well, Tim, let me tell you, by the way, you're going in and out. Sometimes I think there's squelch maybe, and so I'll let you know if it happens often. But anyhow, Tim, I got a text this morning from you that really, you always give me good political advice, I must say. I don't want to call you a moderate because I have a thing that moderates really don't make a lot of difference. You do. And because your moderation comes from wanting results, unlike many who define themselves as moderate. And you said something to me that surprised me. I'll be frank. You said, would it be effective wordplay to associate Trump with a word negative to the wingers by saying Trump has declared jihad on the US Constitution? To which I said, I got to talk about this because it's not just a phrase, it's a reality. Why don't you kind of expand on that?
Well, my thought on that is what he is doing by trying to overthrow the election is in violation of constitutional provisions and governmental norms. But yet, if we were to use those terms, I don't think it's effective for his supporters to understand. The words jihad, and I also used the word fatwa, if you wish to elaborate on that later. But use the term jihad would be something like, say, well, he's declaring war on the Constitution, but it would have a negative connotation. And in fairness to the word jihad, it is often misused. I mean, jihad is actually, you could say that I could say that I have a jihad to lose weight this year. It's a personal mission, but one of the conditions is that it must be led by the person who declares it. And so it's accurate in the context that we're talking about. Donald Trump has declared jihad on the U.S. Constitution.
Now, it seems, I think if you listen to most of the people on the right, they generally wrap themselves in the flag. They wrap themselves in the Constitution. They wrap themselves in life, in promoting life for all. But it seems like all that has happened thus far is anathema to that. Why don't you talk a little about I don't know, we can't call it projection because what they're projecting is diametrically opposed to what they're actually representing. Why don't you tell me your thoughts on that?
Well, I understand what you're saying. And to get to that point, perhaps we should talk about a failure on the left. Whenever the left has a march or a protest, there are no American flags. Whenever there is a march, there should be American flags. This is part of the American experience.
I want to stop you right there. I want to expand on that. I love that you said that, Tim. Folks, that is very important. There's nothing wrong. It is actually we who are supporting the personification of what America represents. Please continue. I just wanted people to hear what you said there.
Yeah, well, I think that's important because you see Trump hugging the flag. You see American flags, American flag jackets. I mean, it is part of the right's campaigns, right or wrong. And the left seems to have divorced itself from America, from that American symbolism. But the left is as American as the right. And we must not divorce ourselves from that reality.
Now, January 6th, the commemoration of January 6th, it seems like there are two commemorations, really. One, they are pretty much attempting to make it seem like January 6th was a war on all that was wrong in America and people just reacting to it. And those of us who actually know that January 6th, in effect, now that we're learning a whole lot more of what happened from the communications between Hannity and the president and Peter Navarro explaining exactly what occurred, it seems like that was a real coup attempt. So where do we go from here?
There's a word that might apply that isn't used, and I think the word would be strong. Now, we talk about coup attempt or overthrow. We couch it. The word really might be treason. because that is what it is. It's an effort to overthrow the constitutional process of the United States. So let's call it treason. And we're trying to do it in different lights, but we have to say, do you side with the traitors, or do you side with the Constitution? The Constitution is very straightforward in what the processes are for electoral colleges. That is, in a democratic society, we can debate that. Debate it both ways too, Egberto. Someday you and I will. But that's part of the problem. But this was a violent and coordinated, planned attempt to disrupt the constitutional process. Reason it was in essence, it would overthrow the Constitution of the United States.
Now, I'm going to tell you something shocking and something that progressives will probably slice me for, right? But in this whole dilemma, as far as how we're handling January 6th and the nature in which how violent it was and what it means to our country, I tell you, I think the strongest person, the person that has shown the most resolved on this whole issue, and people are not going to like it, but I think it's Cheney, Representative Cheney in Congress. Because in my humble opinion, she's the one that has the most to lose. And irrespective of having the most to lose, she is out there not hiding and being a soft Republican in her attack on what occurred. But Liz Cheney is out there putting her neck on the block. I have nothing in common with Liz Cheney at all. None of her values with respect to what I believe in social programs, with what I believe in many other issues align with hers. But as far as being an American, as far as supporting this country, as far as making note what this country represents, I think she has shown more pelotas than Republicans and Democrats alike. I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
My opinion is I agree. And she has I think a 97% conservative approval rating, and somehow that isn't enough for the Republicans. Kind of a frightening thought. I mean, how do you get more than 97%? But let's talk about what you and Liz Cheney share, rather than what makes you different. And what you share is an abiding respect for the Constitution. What you share is an understanding of the need to discuss issues. What you share is a respect to disagree. And both of you would work together well to carry forward what is within the principles of the United States. So let's focus on what you share. I agree with you. I think she will be a survivor. Her competition is weak. But it's unfortunate that the other 9 Republicans who have voted for impeachment seem to be falling by the wayside for various reasons. And people that are deemed to replace them in the primaries are actually even more frightening.
Yeah, that is sad. I tell you something I've also told folks. I told folks, beware. Because I know many progressives, some further left than I am, that's not quite very easy. And some like you, a very solid, what I call a very solid moderate with values as well. I think depending on what we see going down the road, they'll say, well, you know what? We don't agree with this woman, but this woman for real is a leader, has proven herself to be a leader. And who knows where she goes from here? Your thoughts on that?
I would say she's a leader, but first of all, we've had many conversations, and you and I share many of our desired outcomes. Whether it be healthcare, enforcement, bring back the Glass-Steagall Act, a whole list of things. Like, you and I agree on them. But I always like to say that I'm a tactical radical progressive.
Yes.
I just want to say, how's the best way to do it? What's the best way to craft the message? What are the steps we need to do it? Because I understand that half of this country fears the extreme presentation of the left, whether it's self-inflicted or whether it's by less credible media outlets. People fear it. And so for that reason, I think it's important to say, hey, what do we agree on? Now, I bet you and I could go to the people involved with the January 6th insurrection, and we could go there and we could say, the banks are out of control. What do you think? And they go, yeah.
Yes.
You and I could go there and say, Facebook, there has to be some sort of accountability with what's posted on it. They go, yeah. And I bet, if we were to hash it out, we could probably come up with 10 or 20 things where we both going, yeah, that kind of thing. And so that doesn't get presented with in this environment. So let's this January 6th thing, let's figure out it happened. We need to investigate it. It needs to see the sunlight so everybody knows. But we need to tie this with the beauty of the Constitution rather than the ugliness of politics.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. Well, look, this was an impromptu conversation that after getting the text, I said, you've always had good words on all these issues. And I wanted to kind of pick your brain here on January 6th. And as usual, you absolutely never disappoint. As what I always ask at the end of every conversation is, what would you have liked me to ask you that I didn't?
I think you've done well, Egberto, and as always, it's an honor to call you a friend and to be on your show and to participate in quality and meaningful discussions that you promote. It's a service and a skill that we all need.
Brother Tim Danahey of the Tim Danahey Show, former director at Coffee Party USA, among other great things that he does. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
My pleasure. Thank you, Egberto.
We are here with the one and only Greg Palast. Greg Palast is the one who discovered the voting irregularities in many cities around the country, many states around the country, and he did it in Georgia as well. Anyhow, it's January 6th. Please, 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 Greg, give me your thoughts on today. What does it mean? Where do we go from here?
Well, there's a couple thoughts about today. By the way, first, it's a good day for democracy in one place, in Kazakhstan. I was in Kazakhstan just a few years ago and was facing arrest and thrown out of the country by the dictator, a guy named Nursultan Nazarbayev. And I'm glad to say that today he and his kleptocratic family fled. Now, where is Kazakhstan? They have a lot of oil, so you'll find out when the 101st Airborne arrives there to protect the oil fields. But it's a good day where the people have risen up and they're demanding democracy in Kazakhstan. Wouldn't it be nice if Americans were as committed to democracy as people in Kazakhstan in Central Asia? And that's what we're going to have to determine. I think, obviously the concentration today is on the freaks, the schmucks, the fools that smashed into the Capitol. And I have to tell you, what they did was ugly. It was murder because, they literally crushed the skull of a cop with a fire extinguisher. They murdered a cop. So I'm not downplaying what these idiots did, but they weren't the real threat to democracy. The real threat to democracy was 2 days earlier when Donald Trump forced Mike Pence and others to listen to and read a memo by a guy named John Eastman, a lawyer, who's saying, here's how Trump holds on to power, keeps the presidency, and overturns the vote of the Electoral College as well as the popular vote by using in our Constitution the 12th Amendment. Now, most people have never heard of the 12th Amendment. You know, the First Amendment about speech, the Second Amendment is your gun, and the Fifth Amendment, you can't incriminate yourself. Who's ever heard of the 12th Amendment? The answer is this is a special amendment passed just after the original 10 amendments in around 1800 and 1802, something that area. And it allowed, if there was a dispute over who the electors were for the Electoral College, it would be resolved in the House of Representatives. So the idea and it would be one state, one vote. So think about this. There's a dispute in 2024, just as there were in 2020. But in 2024, we now have a Republican majority Senate. If that's a real possibility, because it's 50-50 now, almost a certain Republican majority in the House. So there's a dispute about the vote in Georgia because, once again, let's say Biden's running for re-election. If Biden runs for re-election and he wins Georgia by 12,000 votes as he did last time, this time you can count on the Georgia legislature. You can count on the Georgia legislature to certify not the Biden electors, but to certify the electors to the Electoral College committed to Trump. Now you're saying, oh, wait a minute. What about our right to vote? Read your damn Constitution. There is no right to vote, not one word protecting your right to vote in the United States Constitution, nor its amendments. This is not an oversight. John Adams, Madison, they were dead set against democracy. They talked about it as the most dangerous form of government. They were looking at the French Revolution, and they decided that the Declaration of Independence, which created the Confederation of States, was too close to democracy. So they needed a document, the Constitution, that would prevent democracy. So as one Oxford Don says, the Declaration of Independence gave us democracy. The Constitution took it away. Thomas Jefferson was away in France supporting the revolution. He had nothing to do with writing the Constitution, vehemently opposed it, especially this idea that the public does not choose the president. So we don't have we don't vote for our president. Electors vote for our president. And in the Constitution, who chooses the electors? Not the public, not the voters, but state legislatures. And so you could very well have Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, where the state legislatures will say, oh, there's all this voter fraud. We're going to overturn. We're going to choose the Trump electors. Let's assuming he's the candidate again. We're going to take on the Trump electors and certify them. And that will if that doesn't make Trump president, they will dispute the outcome. And then it goes to the 12th Amendment, where one state gets one vote. I know this is complicated, but this is your Constitution. The Constitution should say the majority of voters pick the president. But no, it says that the legislatures do. And if that creates controversy, then it goes to the House, where it's one state, one vote. Rhode Island will get the same vote as California. And they have 27 Republicans now control 27 state delegations. So Biden would lose, even if he wins the popular vote, even if he wins the Electoral College vote. It could be overturned in the House by one state, one vote. Figure 23 or 24 votes, say, for Biden, because you include Washington, D.C., and 23 votes. 23 votes for Biden, 27 votes for Trump. And that's what could happen in the next election.
We need to clarify something here, because this is very important here.
Yes.
In effect, you are saying that the scheme that they wrote up in the White House was legal. And not only was it legal, what you're saying is that the only thing they could probably pin on the leaders of the insurrectionists are going to go to jail. Those are the peons that went ahead and did violent things.
Right.
What you're saying is the implication of what that theory of overturning the election, it actually passes constitutional muster. And the only legal framework that we have is to try to use the federal laws that said, well, when you spoke to that guy saying, give me X amount of votes, now that particular act was illegal.
Yeah, but that wouldn't change the outcome of an election. In America, we have this odd business. If you remember, like you said, for those who've read my books like The Best Democracy Money Can Buy or seen my film, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. In fact, if you go to gregpalast.com, you'll see my latest investigations on vote thievery. The problem is that if you steal an election, you're still inaugurated. It doesn't take away your seat. You might go to jail. So, like, you know, maybe Trump would go to jail, but that doesn't take away his. He can't go to jail if he's reelected, by the way. So, you know, it's not illegal. It's not illegal to ignore the will of the people. What I'm saying is right in our Constitution, the 12th Amendment. And by the way, it's kind of been used. It was used almost immediately when Andrew Jackson won the presidency. He won the popular vote. He won the electoral vote. But they used the 12th Amendment to deny him the presidency the first time he ran. And John Quincy Adams was named president in 1804, though he lost the popular vote and he lost the electoral vote. They used the 12th Amendment, and each state got to vote. And they voted to put in John Quincy Adams instead of the choice of the public. Later, 4 years later, Jackson won anyway. But we also had this constitutional shenanigans go on much more recently. Because if you think that, by the way, the Supreme Court will step in and say, no, that wasn't fair. No, because we've already seen this court. Now it's more conservative. Back in 2000. In 2000, many people know that I did an investigation of that election, the Al Gore versus George W. Bush. What I found is 58,000 black people were wrongly removed from the voter roll, saying that they were ex-cons felons who at the time couldn't vote in Florida. Not one of those people were guilty of any felony. They were only guilty of voting while black. Now that bent the election. But even worse, when it went to the Supreme Court, because Al Gore had that information from me, but didn't use it in the Supreme Court. He wasn't a big fan of mine. Still isn't. When they went to the Supreme Court, the issue in Bush v. Gore, or Gore v. Bush, was that the state of Florida, under its Secretary of State, Katherine Harris, had stopped the vote count when George Bush was supposedly ahead by just 537 votes. But here's what most people don't understand about that case. They stopped the vote count when there were 178,000 uncounted ballots. Most of those, 29,000, the biggest lump, were from Jacksonville, an African-American city. Mostly African-American cities and towns had not completed their vote count, so they were excluded. If you had counted all those ballots, Al Gore won by a very comfortable margin in Florida and therefore should have been president. However, the Florida legislature, and listen to the craziness of our Constitution, the Florida legislature voted to end the count, despite 178,000 uncounted ballots, to end the count and certify the slate for George Bush, despite what the public wanted in Florida. So the legislature chose it. And that, by the way, is in the second article of the Constitution. So we've got another danger, as we had in Florida, where the Supreme Court said, well, the second article of the Constitution doesn't say you have a right to vote. It says that the legislature of a state chooses the electors that go to the Electoral College. So once again, not the voters, state legislatures. And that's the legal hook that they used to make Bush president in 2000. So if you think we haven't had an undemocratic coup d'etat, well, what the hell was 2000, Egberto?
Yeah, well, you know, that is so true. And the thing about it is you lay out the case, but I also say that the Democrats, as well as Al Gore, are complicit in wanting the maintenance of the system, because most Americans don't know what you've just what you've just stated. If Al Gore went, to put it crazy, crazy, and started saying, look, what they're doing here is using the Constitution to present us as the undemocratic republic that we are. It's time to have constitutional amendments. It's time to have these types of things. Americans still think this is a democracy. The problem is, I think many plutocratic Democrats are complicit in this fraud.
Well, yeah, because in the end, there's one party, what I call Hezbollah Shekel, the party of the cash.
Right.
And so the elites are very concerned about no longer being elite. If you really had a true democracy and we had direct election of our presidents, we had it wasn't until, by the way, 100 years ago that we won direct election of U.S. senators. That was the same system where the legislators.
But it's still fraudulent because they didn't mind doing that, Greg, because when you have 2 senators from South Dakota, 2 senators from North Dakota, Idaho, and these other places, you know that you have misrepresentation with a bias towards you know whom.
Well, think of this. California gets 2 electoral votes. And if you go to my gregpalast.com, you'll see my discussion, right? So they have 2 senators. California with almost 40 million people. You have Wyoming with 500,000 people.
Right.
Gets 2 senators. So in other words, one voter in Wyoming has 80 times the political power of a voter in California. And worse, bigger than Wyoming is the population of Washington, D.C., which gets 0 senators.
Right.
And it's not incidentally an African-American city. So we have Americans who don't get senators. So we have tiny states with senators equal to the power of the majority of the population of America. You have to think about this. The Republicans, it may be a 50-50 Senate.
It's not 50-50 at all, yes.
For population. So it's 50-50 Republican Democrats in the Senate because South Dakota and North Dakota get 4 senators. We now know as we know with Manchin, we now are very aware of 2 senators from West Virginia who can outweigh the votes of New York, Illinois, and California combined. And how is that democracy? Again, it was about creating a nobility so that it's not surprising that the Senate is known as the Millionaires Club and it's quickly becoming the Billionaires Club, so that you have elites very, very panicked in both parties about democracy.
You know, it's amazing because David Cobb, once we were discussing the Constitution, he ran for president on the Green Party, and we served together and moved to amend. And he looked at me and he said, Egberto, this isn't a democracy. Do remember, the only thing special about the Constitution is that the Constitution is a capital document. It is a document that's simply there to maintain capital, nothing more.
Well, yes. In fact, actually, let me see if I can read you. This is the statement of one of our great founding fathers, John Adams, who was the 2nd president of the United States. And he said that he was afraid of democracy. And that's why he was one of the promoters of the Constitution. Remember, we had George Washington was not our first president. He was actually our 5th. We first had a confederation of states.
Right.
Thomas Jefferson hated the Constitution. He was in France supporting the French Revolution, so he wasn't at the Constitutional Convention. Then he came back and said, what the hell have you guys done? And so therefore he said, we have to put some limits on this crazy thing. And that was the basis of the creation of the Bill of Rights. But Adams said that democracy is a dangerous thing because it's an instrument of, and I'm quoting him now, the firewomen, badauds, which are like lazy, ditto heads, the stage players, the atheists, the deists, the scribblers for any cause at $3 a day, the Jews and other undesirables who would, quote, destroy all nobles. Again, this is a quote from John Adams. You're going to have all these undesirables now. Said that he didn't include black people because they didn't have the vote, but
they didn't have the vote anyway. Yeah.
At the time, by the way, one of the things he was afraid of was that when the French Revolution, after storming the Bastille in the French Revolution, that black people in Haiti were named as full citizens of France. Napoleon withdrew that later. But when he became emperor and democracy ended, but actually you had this huge number of new African American.
That was before Toussaint Louverture, right?
And so you actually had citizenship and voting rights for Black people right after the French Revolution. And this was very scary to the Americans, to the American elite. And he says, that's an important point where he says that this type of democracy, quote, will, quote, destroy all nobles. He didn't mean that as a good thing, like we're going to destroy nobility and privilege. He thought that as a dangerous, horrible thing, that we were going to destroy the nobles. So they created this constitution where you'd have this Senate, and they were thinking of the Roman Senate, where you had these, in the Roman Senate, only patricians could serve. Now, remember when they wrote the Constitution in most states, you actually had to have property to be able to vote. So they thought, well, if we give the president the power to choose senators, which later changed, and the power to choose the president, to state legislators and not to voters, then we can be sure that the landed gentry will do the right thing and give us a nice noble as president.
That is amazing. It is amazing, but I think it is important to note that those who are fighting on January 6th, those who went and invaded the Capitol, little do they know that they were really invading to support people that doesn't have their interest at hand. Let's close it with you finishing that particular thought.
Okay, the people, that's one of the problems that we do have with democracy, but I'll still take it over any other form of system. You can fool, as a wiser man than me once said, you can fool some of the people all of the time. And so you have literally these poor guys smashing into the Capitol. Not all of them were poor. As it turns out, by the way, the majority were white-collar workers or small business owners. That's the majority of people who were arrested and charged in the Capitol attack, of the 725 charged so far. But these are people who really believe that their best interests were served by Donald Trump, the guy who said, let's fight the billionaires, even though he's a billionaire. Let's fight all their special privileges and tax breaks, even though he had the privileges and tax breaks. It was a con job. And we'll always have con jobs, and it'll always suck in, as Lincoln said, some of the people all the time, and all the people some of the time. So that's always the danger. But democracy seems to have this self-correcting mechanism where people can wise up. But that's why this show, your comments, the most important thing we can do, there's my assistant showing up. The most important thing we can do is not unstupid ourselves and find out what's going on in this planet, from Kazakhstan to the 12th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. We're not going to, as Jefferson said, his push for universal education was part of his push for democracy. He said, one thing you don't want to do is have a stupid electorate. I don't know if we've lived up to what you had in mind, Tom, but we're trying.
I said that was the last question, but I want you to, we've been concerned that the place has been moving progressively to the right, the world, pretty much. I want you to address what recently occurred in Chile, where we actually got some progressive movement, maybe a directional change in Latin America.
Well, once again, what we had in Chile, for those, we just had the election of a left-wing president after several decades of kind of neoliberal presidents, not always conservative. Some were very, would be considered, equivalent politically to Joe Biden, kind of middle of the road Democrat types. But they haven't had a radical in half a century since Salvador Allende was elected.
And killed,
and killed. So for those who don't know the story, back in 1970, on September 11th, 1970 to be exact, a coup directed by Henry Kissinger and Richard Nixon from the U.S. We now have all the cables and everything, overthrew the elected government of Chile, because the elected government of Chile was run by a duly elected member of the communists. He was a socialist, and he nationalized the copper mines and the electric system and the phone company, which were owned by American corporations. And therefore, we ended up saying, well, we like democracy, but not if it impinges on the profits of our corporations. So we overthrew that government. And thousands of people were murdered who tried to defend democracy. And so now in Chile, we see the resurgence of the reaction to that kind of, it was a coup d'etat that was not only political, but it was corporate. You basically had the corporations overthrowing a government that was in their way. And now there is finally a reaction against it. And that's extraordinary. And we're going to see that throughout Latin America. It goes back and forth. I expect right now we have this ultra-right anti-vaxxer president of Brazil named Bolsonaro. I think he won't be lasting.
I don't think he makes it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that you're going to have the return of the socialist leader who is very popular and very successful, Lula. So, yeah. So I do think that that the world is wising up to these so-called populists who are anti the populace, and rich guys who are like saying, no, you don't want worker protection.
We got to cut here, man. We got to cut here. I can't wait for da Silva, Lula da Silva. I can't wait for him to get reelected in Brazil. But anyhow, Greg Palast, author of How Trump Stole 2020, he almost did it.
44,000 votes.
He almost did it. Hey, buddy, thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right. You keep doing what you do because we need your work out there.
Thank you so much. Go to gregpalast.com and I'll be back with you, Egberto, anytime you want. Thanks a lot. Bye.
You can get any one of my books as a gift for becoming a member of KPFT. Go to kpft.org, click that donate button, select Politics Done Right as the show you're supporting, and go into the gift area and select As I See It, Class Warfare, the only resort to right-wing doom. Or you can also get It's Worth It, How to Talk to Your Right-Wing Relatives, Friends, and Neighbors. Or go to How to Make America Utopia, Take Away the Economy from Those Who Rigged It. If you get one book, it gives you one particular membership price. 2 books, you get a discount, and 3 books, you get an even better discount. So please consider becoming a member of KPFT, and in the process, you get the gifts of the books. You can get Politics Done Right Mondays through Fridays on Facebook Live at facebook.com/politicsdoneright, on YouTube Live at politicsdoneright.com/YouTube. Please do not forget to follow me on Twitter for updates. My handle is at Egberto Willies, at EGBERTO WILLIES. That's it, folks. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right, and you know how I end this baby. I am what? Out. Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike